share in and be an important part of an Australian journey. The Australian... The crucial time for the meeting of structures and content has arrived. For the first time, and sculptured fabric can be erected. The Pantechnicons are transformed into the exhibition's environments, and as the longest day draws to a close, the character of the exhibition suddenly appears. Everywhere we see the culmination of the extensive work of the architects, designers, engineers and artists. Everyone who enters finds themselves drawn into the exhibition. They can well realize that more than Finally, all is in readiness. The 6 themes, journeys, environment, identity, today, together and futures have become a reality. The hundreds of exhibits, fascinating original and commissioned works, and striking displays. No one emerges untouched. Wait the participation of all Australians.
It can fly at more than twice the speed of sound, and service training on it has already started here at Williamtown. As well as being very beautiful, this aeroplane is as deadly as anything that flies. Meet the Mirage.
The Mirage aircraft was developed by the French in the late 1950s. Australia decided to buy 100 for our Air Force back in 1963. 2 prototypes were flown out, the rest built in Australia under licence. And they were rolled out for the first time in a blaze of publicity.
It can fly at more than twice the speed of sound, and service training on it has already started here at Williamtown. As well as being very beautiful, this aeroplane is as deadly as anything that flies. Meet the Mirage.
All up, 60 Mirage Jets have been based at Williamtown. Price tag $1.5 million each. But they took the Australian force into the supersonic range, the first planes to be equipped with onboard radar and capable of flying in all weathers. None of our Mirage Jets have seen active combat duty, but that doesn't mean we haven't lost a few. 47, in fact, over the past 24 years, some of them involving pilots based at Williamtown. In August 1976, a trainee pilot and his instructor had a lucky escape when the front landing wheel malfunctioned. Both were forced to eject. The jet crashed in bushland just north of the base. In 1982, this Mirage crashed in tidal flats near Port Stephens. Once again, an undercarriage problem forced the pilot to ditch the jet. It had to be unceremoniously dragged out of the mud. In 1985, a Mirage flown by pilot Mackelman disappeared somewhere over the Stockton Bight. The pilot and wreckage haven't been seen since. And just last year, engine failure forced a young pilot to ditch his plane into the ocean. It was a routine flight with a rescue which was far from routine.
I think he was probably fairly
picked
pleased
up
to
by
see us,
passing fishermen before being winched into a rescue helicopter.
I didn't have time for any random thoughts. I'm now into carrying out explicit checklist actions, and so I was merely running through those without sitting down thinking, hey, I'm going to have to eject soon or something like that.
But it's now all over for Australia's longest-serving fighter aircraft. The Mirage is moving over for the impressive new FA-18s.
We're looking at the frigate contract as a very important part of this city's future and this region's future. Is there any hope for Newcastle that we may be, as you said back in 1987, now a hot favourite?
I think you're, well, if you look at the competition that you've gone through already, it's been very substantial. The ship project is not like the submarine project, where there are just one or two favoured locations. You came from a field of, I think, something close to a dozen to get down to the notion of the last two, position of the last two. So you've already gone through hot competition. You've already proved yourselves, and there's just this last hurdle, and it's going to be a very tight race indeed.
Any reason for optimism? What factors would weigh in our advantage, do you think?
Well, I think you're not looking particularly for advantage here. I think it's a very fine line, the decision between the two that we'll take sometime towards the middle of next year. Basically, you've got a good shipyard. Basically, you've got good shipbuilders. You've got a good consortium. You've got people who are obviously going to have considerable expertise in the logistics area. People are going to have considerable expertise in the electronics associated with a ship. You've got a good balanced consortium. And so have your competitors. This is a competition in which we have total confidence that both sides are going to be able to build and deliver those ships. So what we're looking for is the best commercial deal and the best industrial deal.
You've said, in fact, that the Williamtown dockyard is the best equipped in Australia.
Yes, it's well equipped, but so's Carrington's. Both have produced warships. So both have considerable expertise in warship production and understanding what the Defence Department needs. As I said, this is a very tight run thing.
There's some talk that perhaps the old Melbourne club syndrome might come to play here, that Newcastle's only a regional centre and Melbourne is a Victorian capital with a rather substantial power base.
You'd say that Williamstown was a regional centre, Newcastle was a regional centre. The old Melbourne club, I've never heard of the old Melbourne club allegedly being an influence in the Labor Party. People suggest sometimes it has been in the Liberal Party. But in the end, the politics of this are irrelevant.
Even the fact that Newcastle may face a federal election just months after the decision?
Look, the only way you establish integrity in your national decision-making processes is if you take national decisions. And if the general public were to assume that we put ships into Melbourne or ships into Newcastle or took ships away from Newcastle and put them into North Queensland or whatever, they assumed that the federal government operated on that basis, they'd be entitled to vote us out of office. And I don't intend to place the federal government in that position.
With both consortiums looking so good, is there a risk you may split the contract?
Well, that wouldn't be the reason for doing it, and it's not the most likely outcome. But it will still be a matter for consideration of the federal government when the decision is taken as to whether or not they want to construct in 2 yards. But I must say that neither consortium wants us to do that. Both consortiums want all the work, at least all the assembly, for the 8 ships, possibly 12. If the New Zealanders stay with us, as we expect they will, want that work done in their own yards. But it will be a matter for decision at the time by the federal government as to whether they want to split the work. But if they do, it won't be for political reasons. It will be because they, for example, they may wish to ensure themselves a long-haul competition when subsequent frigate buys are considered.
You mentioned that it is a defence contract and perhaps people may lose sight of that, but we do have the airbase at Williamtown, which is quite a strategic location and could offer perhaps security if we had to defend the frigate contract in the future. Does that weigh in the government's mind when it makes a decision of this magnitude?
No, we would regard all sites as being properly protected by our armed forces. If a conflict came about, then clearly they'd be strategically significant locations and they would be protected. What we're looking for here is commercial performance. That's what we're looking for. And what we're looking for is the viability of the organisations that are putting together the project, and that we can be convinced that what they're offering us will be delivered. We are quite convinced that we can get a very good frigate out of Newcastle and a very good frigate out of Williamstown. There are no problems with that as far as that is concerned. So what we're going into is the detail. Now, exactly what will be advanced in our industry by the deal that is offered by Newcastle. Exactly what cost is going to be involved in that.
How much is the design an important criteria?
It always is going to be important. I don't want to undersell that. But it's not the same as with the submarine project, where the design was really in hot competition. You've got here two proven designs for two very good frigates. Now, I'm not ruling out the design as playing a part, but it's just nowhere near the role it played in the submarine selection process. It's industry that we're interested in here.
In a word, room for cautious optimism?
Well, I think when you've got a 50-50 chance, one can always afford to be optimistic.
I think that the general public doesn't know what it's like in caravan parks, and the Minister also seems to be completely ignorant of the real facts. He's talked to the industry, but of course the industry gives a fairly rosy view.
If we want it, Australia may just have a new Olympic champion. Daniela's credentials are hard to fault. She is an elite athlete. The only problem is, sport in this country may not be able to afford her. With her coach, Daniela has defied great odds to come to Newcastle. And as Robert Penfold reported from Turkey in October, Australia offered the Romanian athletes hope of a new life.
They came to the Australian Embassy in Ankara today to hear what their future would be. Danielle Costian, the world-class discus thrower, and her coach, Ion Zanfriac.
Daniela and Ion's lives changed dramatically after the Balkan Games in Turkey in August, when they seized the chance of political freedom, first through the Turkish government and then the Australian Embassy in Ankara. After weeks of negotiations and with plane tickets paid for by their Newcastle friends, the two athletes flew to Australia, leaving behind their families and their culture. Romania is a small country on the edge of the Black Sea, flanked by Russia, Yugoslavia and Bulgaria. Its 23 million people are thought to be some of the poorest in the communist bloc, a country where simple things like hot water and fresh fruit are regarded as luxuries. Daniela and Ion are reluctant to criticise their homeland, but are quick to compliment their adopted country.
I like very much Australia. I heard about Australia many years ago. In Australia we have possibility good eating, good fruit, and free we make sport.
Ion has a wife and two children still in Romania. Since arriving in Newcastle, Daniela and coach have been sharing a small two-bedroom Mayfield home with their Romanian friend Annika Opera, her daughter and a friend Sophie Pop. With no money or job, They have no alternative. They were offered a position at the Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra, but the champion discus thrower refused the deal, saying they needed money, not training facilities.
They offer us only condition for training, for eat and sleep. We need a job because we want to bring here our family.
Okay. So, will you be living in Newcastle?
Yes, in Newcastle, and we compete for Newcastle.
Daniela's life is a constant grind of training, sleeping and a lot of eating. The Australian Athletics Association has asked Paul Bustede of the Newcastle Athletics Club to do what he can for them, and he's only too pleased to have such a great athlete in his club.
Bravo.
She's throwing over 68 metres just at training. How does that rate?
Well, 68 metres, which she was throwing here now, well, that's in excess of 5 metres over the Australian record, and I believe it's a good metre over the Commonwealth record.
How does it compare with Newcastle standards?
Well, Newcastle's record is very dismal in comparison to this sort of standard, being only 44.5, I believe.
Well, she could throw that with her eyes closed.
She would throw that standing up, warming up.
Great technician, this East German.
Daniela's training throws could have easily put her in medal contention at Seoul. If she threw her personal best of 73.84 metres, she would have won gold.
72.30, another Olympic record, and extends her lead.
It's every athlete's dream to be the world's best.
Here.
To win gold at the Olympics for Daniela would be the ultimate accolade. Do you wish you were there competing?
Yeah, I wish, but it is impossible. But I hope to go to next Olympic game for Australia.
Jorn says that in Australia, Daniela can be a better discus thrower than in Romania. With the freedom to travel and compete, she is expected to improve. Their journey has been a difficult one, not only escaping from Romania, but discovering that in Australia, they must struggle too. Daniela wants to stay in this country, especially Newcastle, but as a champion athlete, she wants champion financial rewards. Meagre sports scholarships at the Institute of Sport cannot help pay to bring her family from Romania to Newcastle. To put it bluntly, if Australia wants a gold medal in the women's discus at the Olympics, we'll have to pay for it.
Nah.
We're very attached to the rats. We love them. I've been offered a lot of money for this rat time and time again, but there's no way I'll sell him.
What's the attraction, do you think?
They're just a good pet to have. People that live in units, houses where you can't have a dog or a cat, it's against the lease, they'll buy a rat.
The Premier was at Shoal Bay giving Liberal candidate Bob Scott plenty of photo opportunities, but he stopped short of actually handing over state government land to the harbourside Haven Retirement Village. The rest home has 400 elderly on its waiting list and needs the 1.8 hectares to expand its accommodation. The Premier promised an answer before November the 5th. At the other end of the Port Stephens electorate, Bob Carr put the education issue on the agenda. He urged a parent protest vote over the education cuts proposed for next year, with claims that 17 primary school teachers and 11 high school teachers will go in the process.
It means that kids in the system are going to be living with an inferior education system, a system that's inferior from that a previous generation went through. We're saying that's wrong. We're saying that we shouldn't be bringing about a reduction in the quality of education at this time in our nation's history, in our state's history. Quality of education at this time in our nation's history, in our state's history.